we're not even just struggling, I think, with our own identity of who we are, but we're also battling how everyone else sees us.
Mhm.
Um, and again, it's your pendulum, man.
Yo, I'm Bryce the Third.
And I'm Liz McKean.
And you are now tuned in to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. Here we dive into all the recovery stories from around the world.
And we talk about all pathways because there's no one right way to recover.
If you've been with us for a while, you know how powerful stories are. So get ready for your community to get just a little bigger today.
We are so glad that you're here. Let's get into the show.
Liz, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Oh my gosh, it is the new year.
Yeah, right. How is your energy?
My energy is, I don't know, a little renewed. Little frustrated because technology's not been on my side today, but I'm now Inspector Gadget again and not Weird Speeds. So back
Nobody
on
will
track.
understand what
Nobody
you're
gets
talking
that
about.
joke. It's been a battle behind the scenes, folks, but we made it here.
Yeah, nah, I feel like, sometimes showing up to do the show when you got those tech issues, I've been going to like Recovery Dharma meetings kind of regularly recently.
Awesome.
And one of the last meetings I went to, like I was late. And so it's different than like a regular meeting where you can go and be late. And they doing the announcements, so you just kind of shuffle in. Like in this one, if you too late, they in the middle of a meditation. And so here you come taking your shoes off, slamming the door and running. And so I came and I ran to like sit and meditate. And like it impacted the sitting part like so intensely because I'm like trying to get settled and meditate good after running. It was interesting. And I think that's how like tech can impact what we do, where it's like tech get wonky and then we get in here and it's like, okay, time for a show, everybody. And if everybody's filled with like, will it continue to work?
Stumbling over our own feet and everything. Yeah, no,
but
that's exactly
such
right.
is life. Such is life.
It's just life. It's the beauty and the challenge of tech.
Well, all right. Thanks for asking, Liz. I'm doing well today, and I am making my home in this new year, and I'm excited to be here with you all. I'm excited to be here with you, Liz, and I'm excited to be with our guest today, especially after reading what the guest sent in as to what he wanted to talk about and what he's interested in, and just in the beginning of the tech stuff, how patient this guest was, and I'm just super excited to talk to this guy. So who do we have with us here today, Liz?
Well, today we have the wonderful and ever so patient Chris Clemens. And Chris, you gave us a little bit of a bio, but I'm going to just give you my own intro because I'm going rogue today. Tech didn't work, so I'm just going to do my own thing. So I came across Chris's Instagram before I even moved to Rochester because I was looking for just my people in Rochester. And he's got a cool name for his Instagram that I'll let him introduce in a second. But I found him and then immediately had this like, wow, he's really cool. It's like kind of a local celebrity in like the sober scene. And so I reached out not long ago. It took me that long and he responded. It was nice. And then he came to my yoga class. And so I'm so excited that he's here and he does cool things for the recovery community. It's funny because one of the things he said was that he wasn't sure if his story was gonna, be meaningful or whatever. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like you make this look like fun and like the life that we all think we have to give up is still available if we want it. And so like, heck yeah, we want your story and we want all of you. And we're so glad you're here. So Chris, welcome. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thanks, you guys. But I feel like we could probably just stop with that.
That's the end of the show.
That's it. I appreciate that. It's always interesting to hear how other people see us.
It is.
When we know how we see ourselves in our own brain and which things match up. My Instagram account is my website and the Facebook page is NonROCaholic. Bryce and I were talking a little bit before we were online about previous creative projects that I had and how I had gotten burned out and decided like I didn't want to do anything creative at all. I didn't want to take photos. I didn't want to write. I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to just like sit. And I think part of that was COVID. Like when COVID happened and the world shut down, it was like it was almost kind of nice. I hate to say it, but it was like the only thing you had to do was just be safe. And like if you were like not sick, you were winning. And it was like that was the only responsibility that you had for a very short time. Uh, and I kind of really just enjoyed not doing much. I've been sober for a while, and non-alcoholic drinks have been something that have been an interest of mine for a long time. And after taking a break from my other creative projects, I kind of got a little bit more energy stirring, and I thought I want to do something, but I don't really know what. And I definitely want something that's way less popular than what I had before, because it will be way less work and way less responsibility. Turns out this is just as popular. So
Aw, shucks.
nuts. But it also, not that my other creative projects haven't had meaning, but this one feels much different in terms of fulfilling something for me and helping other people in a way that is different than how I was helping with other stuff in the past. So I'm glad that you found NonROCaholic, and I'm glad that other people have found it. I've met some really cool people face to face, and have built a little community around it. So it's been pretty damn cool.
So there's NonROCaholic. Is the ROC, is that Rochester or what?
Totally.
It is?
The
Okay.
Rock.
Totally is. Yeah. And I was like, I'm like, I guess I could do like an Instagram account for like all these non-alcoholic drinks that I find. Like, what would it be? And I went through a bunch of ideas and non-alcoholic, and I was like, I'll go with that one.
Nice.
And in retrospect, I'm pleased that I landed on that one.
Nice. Yeah. At first, I thought you was like anti-rock music. I'm like,
No.
maybe there's a deeper story here.
I'm on board with rock music. Yeah, rock. Here in Rochester, New York, the home of Genesee Brewery, the historic chat room.
Yeah.
Also, it's coming up pretty soon. That's an interesting tidbit that like reaches this conversation. Fairport, New York, somewhere in late January, is the very first place that beer was put in cans.
Really? There are so many things in Rochester that it's like, wait, that started here. I mean, most people, maybe not, but the Kodak started here. Like I live basically next door to the George Eastman house, which is like wild history there.
Yeah.
And then, Xerox was here. What is it? Naltrine, those plastic like water jugs that are kind of cool.
Yeah.
Nalgene, thank you. Like that's here. Like there's so many things, and I'm like, whoa, like it's kind of a big deal to live in the Rock.
Rochester was the very first place. We didn't invent marshmallows, but it was the first place that they were commercially created so that they made it into like households. That there's one small physical evidence of that over by High Falls. There's a building where you can see Rochester marshmallow, and it's like super faded.
What? I wonder, is that related to the fact that Jell-O is from here, like the Jell-O brand, because gelatin is in marshmallows?
That's another one, but I do think they are unrelated. The companies were unrelated, but yeah, it's endless. Yeah, well, that's what my previous creative project was about. It was called Exploring Upstate, and finding all this stuff in upstate New York that people were like, "What?" And yeah, it's endless.
And I grew up here, and I didn't know any of these things. Now I'm here having a renewed excitement for the local area. So.
Yeah, that makes you feel like when you have more context about the spaces that you're in, it makes those spaces feel like you're a part of something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like even something is like, I mean, I won't say insignificant. I'm sure like marshmallows is life to some people, but like something as like small as a marshmallow, and it's like, oh yeah, well I come from where those were commercialized.
Yeah.
Like
you're welcome for your marshmallows.
What Henry Ford did for cars, or Rochester did for marshmallows, and you need to thank us for that.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's amazing.
It's so true. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I feel like speaking of being part of something, I think you have totally changed the way I look at like the non-alcoholic drink industry. Because that wasn't. Honestly, it didn't really appeal to me to have a drink. Like for a lot of years, it was just like, I have one reason for having a drink that is, anything in this genre. But then, recently when there's a totally non-alcoholic bar that opened up here in Rochester, which is cool that we've gone to. And it was like, oh, this is actually really fun. It's really fun to have like something fancy, something that's like, I don't know, like a special occasion kind of thing. And like my husband and I have really enjoyed, I don't know, just something new to discover. And full caveat or whatever, like for folks that this isn't that isn't an area that feels comfortable or safe or anything to your recovery, like that is a-okay. We always talk about how we want to create a world where there's something for everybody, and that's not going to be where there's everything for everybody, and that's okay. But it's cool that like you've really expanded my understanding of what is out there. It's like a freaking industry and some of the best marketing that I've ever seen.
Multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's growing exponentially. So to your point real quick, so when I first got sober, I was basically told like 0 alcohol, 0 psychoactive, anything. Like I didn't use mouthwash that had alcohol, no cold medicine. Like in rehab, they were like, you take nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that very seriously. Like I didn't eat food that was cooked in alcohol, and people would be like, but it cooks out. And I'm like, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But after being sober a while, and feeling as though I had gone through that change to become a very different person, I didn't feel any desire to drink alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that if I was going to eat something where it was cooked with alcohol, I wasn't eating it because I was trying to get one over on my sobriety or sneak in something. I was curious about what it was, and there was sort of an evolution that went with that. And I remember a lot of my background in growing up in recovery is rooted in 12-step work. So I worked with a lot of people as a sponsor and was like the same thing, like no non-alcoholic beers, you don't touch them, don't go near them. Yeah. And now here I am, like almost 30 years sober, and I'm a huge proponent of non-alcoholic beers, but I also don't think it's a good idea for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm in a very, very different place than I am in my recovery than I was 10, 20, 25, 30 years ago. And I feel okay with it, but it's not a good idea for everybody, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah. I think I've seen in the thing that you sent out. You were 17 when you got sober?
It was a month before my 17th birthday. Yeah.
So that's a whole thing in itself, huh?
Here's the whole thing. Yeah, and I remember like being in rehab and going to 12-step meetings, and people are like, how bad could your life have been? And honestly, I've my understanding of that has also evolved over time. And the more time that passes looking back on who I was then and my behavior, I mean, I certainly was not like in the same depths as like Matthew Perry or, people who have profound life experiences with addiction and substance abuse that end up at the end of the road. But when you look at my family history with mental health struggles and alcoholism, and you look at my behaviors and the directions that I was headed, it's very easy to see like that's the trajectory that's about to be going. And I kept getting in trouble, and then I'd get in more trouble, and I would charm my way out of it. And finally I got in some trouble that I couldn't charm my way out of. And yeah, that day, when you're taken out of school, like with the police, and like all the kids are like looking out the classrooms. It was trouble. You don't say like, sorry, I won't do it again.
Detention won't necessarily solve this.
No. So I had some reckoning to do. Mm-hmm. And part of that was me saying like, you know what, I'll cool it for a bit. And I had no intentions of staying sober at all. Mm-hmm. I had intentions of cooling it until I had gotten out of trouble and I was in the clear. But something funny happened, and I realized like life was getting easier. And there was there was more opportunities there than there were with the things that I was doing before. And I don't think I ever like said like I'm committed to doing this forever. It was like, I'll just a little while longer, a little while longer.
One day at a time, if you will.
And that's exactly how it worked. It was totally, I was like, you know what? I'll just do it like for a little while longer. I don't have to do this the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But as they say, single individual days end up adding up. And then I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to hold on to this. Yeah. So that's how that worked.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff to meditate on there. I think I'd want to start with the notion that, like, in hindsight, looking back, like, was it as bad? But like, I think addiction and our experience with it is not something that we can hold up to other addiction experiences and compare them. Ultimately, like, if you got to a place where you were in rehab, like you got there. You got there, like, and
that was the second, like,
well,
so like, yeah, so you're totally right. Like, you don't just end up there because everything's going great.
Right. Yeah. So, because I think about it, I got sober young too. I was not 17, but I was 24. And and I think that's the second meditation where it's like, people who socially drink and the concept of like mocktails and non-alcoholic beverages, a majority of my addiction took place before I was legally able to do that. So in sobriety and in recovery, like, I didn't really care about mocktails because like my social life wasn't based on having something in my hand at that point. And I'm like, cool, like this is what I do. Like, I don't need something. But I definitely have come to understand how cool it is to feel like, you're a part of something. Everybody else got some in their hand, so you got some in your hand. And I've seen people that are even like sober curious be brought to environments and events and communities through connecting through non-alcoholic beverages. And so I think that's pretty cool. My question to you would be, how do you think, like, why do you think you took to mocktails? If, like, did you have the bar experience? Because I mean, some people had places where they could go to the bar and nobody ID'd them because they looked 35 at 12.
No, I mean, I got sober before I could ever legally drink. I've never legally taken a drink. I liked live music, and I would go hang out with other sober people, and we'd go to like see bar bands and stuff, or go to shows or even festivals, and I would hang out with other sober people. So there was that. But a little bit about where we live here in Rochester. We're often considered the gateway to the Finger Lakes region, which is the second most popular wine producing region in the United States. Our culture here is all alcohol. There are over 500 breweries in New York State. There's over 400 wineries in New York State. Over a third of the wineries are within like an hour's drive of our house here in Rochester. We got meaderies. Apples are one of the most prominently grown crops in New York. So we have a ton of hard cider makers. So if you say, I want to drive to the Finger Lakes for a day and go explore, typically it's something booze related. And what I was experiencing as I was getting older is, I'd hang out with somebody, like I was maybe dating somebody who wanted to do a wine flight, and she'd have her wine flight and I would just stand there, and it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucked. And I was like, I don't need like something fancy, but like something. And I kept having those experiences all over throughout the Finger Lakes and these different places, these like real fancy prefix dinners with like this renowned chef. And it's like a 7-course meal, and each one is like a different type of wine. And I'm like, what the hell? So I think that's where my interest came in, was I'd like to have something interesting too, because it can't be alcohol. And the point that you were making earlier, Bryce, that I wanted to hit on real quick was, you mentioned like the sober curious movement. I think 20 years ago, you stopped drinking if you were an end of the road, down and out, skid row, bum alcoholic. I don't think that's happening now. I do think it's happening, but it's not the trend. There are people who are just saying, you know what? I don't think this is serving me right now. Maybe I'm not an alcoholic, but maybe I don't want alcohol anymore. And there's this whole brand new group of people who are being introduced to a concept of sobriety that didn't get it through rehab. They just simply got it through, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So as a result, there's this whole brand new group of people that are interested in non-alcoholic beers, de-alcoholized wine, zero proof spirits, and the industry's growing fast.
Yeah, I think that's part of like a social consciousness or a social awareness. And it's cool when you're a part of the experience of like the shift of culture, and it benefits you health wise, because we know all the benefits that like overconsumption of alcohol, or all the non-benefits that overconsumption of alcohol can have on you. But like, to speak to your experience, Chris, I don't think that social consciousness was there. And when you're 17, that's another thing too that I've looked at in my own story in hindsight. Like, you're still kind of building an understanding of your identity. And so that's a major shift in the midst of having the natural process of like building your identity anyway.
Yeah.
How do you think that played a role in you getting sober so young?
It was, I guess I would say, a struggle to not to figure out like where I belonged. The majority of my friends were all older people, because they were people who were sober. There was a large contingent of sober young people in Rochester. And in fact, we started, I think in 97, we started a young people's meeting on Saturday night, which is still going downtown. So there was a whole bunch of young people that really wanted to be sober. But I think most of the people that I ended up surrounding myself with were older people that, well, on page 17 of that big book, it says we are people who normally would not mix. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. And I think those relationships were where I was like, I don't understand like what's happening or where this fits. But I knew that I was like 18, 19 years old, going to a men's meeting on Sunday night, talking about feelings. And my peers in school were like that was absurd. And honestly, even now, it sort of sounds a little bit absurd. But I also think as a result, I skipped a lot of pain and struggle that I saw some of my age group peers go through.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was better or worse. We were just doing different things.
And Liz, I know I'm like ball hogging right now,
That's
but
cool.
like, I think, because I've often thought beyond, like, my addiction got me to the rooms where there were, 12-step programs, recovery conversations. But then when I got there, I'm like, oh damn, like, it wasn't even about like the usage. It was about like the way that I approach life and my perception around life, and all of these ways of showing up. And now like there's really like an innate craving for, like, if I'm in a space and we can't talk about those feelings, or if it's not like healthy men in the room, or if I'm not surrounded by people who, I could be transparent and open and honest with, like, I'm not there for too long. And so I could imagine stumbling upon that at the age of developing and understanding, because also having the experience of being walked out of school and everybody looking at you can have the alternate effect of like, oh, this is who I am. Like, I'm the person who gets pulled out of school by the police. Like, I'm him now. And I work with kids in the juvenile detention center, and like, they're in here 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years and they're 13, from 13 to 18. And like, that really imprints on their identity.
Yeah.
And so you've had like both of those experiences, but you leaned into like having these tools to be able to show up as a healthy person. One thing I want to zoom in on though, because you sent this over too, is that
You'll
you
have to
said,
wait.
huh?
Liz, you'll have to wait.
It's cool. Earlier when I was talking to Bryce and I was like, oh, this is who we have coming on today, and I'm so excited. And I was like, you guys are going to get along. I'm excited to see where the conversation goes between the two of you. I just had a feeling. So as I predicted.
Yeah, but you sent over that it opened up an opportunity for new difficulties in later in life that you may have not experienced had you not gotten sober at such a young age. And so I'm interested at if you remember what those difficulties were that you were hinting at that getting sober at a young age brought.
Yeah, what I should have done was before we started recording is go back and look at all the things that I typed in.
I think you called it replacement addictions if that's what you're referring to, Bryce.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple things that happen. So like one of them is like social stuff and developing like a social circle. I remember for my 21st birthday, like I didn't do what other 21st birthday celebrations usually were. In fact, I think I remember I went out with a couple people, one of whom was also sober, but then a couple other people weren't. And we just went out to dinner and it was a fun night, but it's completely different than any other 21st birthday, or typically what you think of as like that rite of passage. But Bryce, what you were just saying was like you discovered that it wasn't really about use. It was about all of the reasons why we sought out those things, and that recovery and sobriety was really more about growing and mental health and spirituality. And I certainly have not done that perfectly by any means. But there have totally been times in my adult life since I've been sober where I've struggled immensely with certain things. And I recognize that, and actually this example goes back to me thinking like maybe I didn't go far enough down that path to actually really be someone who had to get sober, but recognizing that I had patterns. I've always been a cigar smoker. And, as life went on, I realized like I was smoking more and more and more cigars. And like a handful of years ago, I was smoking like 2 or 3 cigars a day, which is disgusting. But like,
I'm sorry. There's somebody who smokes 4 cigars a day listening to this episode. Like, damn, man, it's disgusting. I mean,
first of all, how dare you?
Right. But I had developed this behavior and this habit and this ritual that isn't perfectly healthy. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how did I get to this? How did I suddenly get here? And I think that people probably end up doing something very similar. And I think that's where the whole sober curious movement comes from, is people didn't realize they were developing these bad habits. They just suddenly found themselves in the midst of it and went, wait a second, like this isn't what I wanted.
How did I get to 3 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches a day?
Right, exactly.
I feel very called out in that statement, Bryce, but that's fine. What is moderation? I don't even know her.
Yeah, moderate. So one of the recurring themes in my recovery has always been balance and recognizing that I have a really difficult time maintaining balance, and that I typically swing back and forth, and then I'll go like, wait a second, was that balance over there? And then swing like back forth and be like, wait, I think that's what it was. And that's why I can't moderate.
You know what? I've had the experience. So I call it the pendulum, right? And it's being a father and being somebody who is also like around people at different places of their life and the experience that they've had. Like I feel like people who grow and like show up for life, like beyond, numbing up from it and then running away from it, but like showing up for what life has, like there's the pendulum swing anyway of like, I believe this and I'm completely in this, or like, I don't believe anything and I will never believe anything ever again in my life. And like what I've learned as I continue to grow, especially living intentionally in recovery, is that like the pendulum still swings, but
Yeah.
like now there's the experience of the last time it swung over all the way over there. So it's like, I won't go all the way over there. So I have a bit of both. And I think that's like the natural process of like cultivating wisdom anyway. And, you know, they say that thing where it's like, especially around the tables, where it's like, you know, wherever you started using that is like where you pick up at when you get sober. So it's like, so technically like, I'm like 18, 19 right now, like in intentional years, you know, and it's like, so it's okay if I'm like all the way over here with gummy bears and I eat like 1,000 gummy bears. Like the insane extremes that I've gone to in my recovery has been like, I was getting gummy bears from Germany and it was a whole thing. But you know, like such is life. And I think the beautiful thing is like recovery allows for us to show up in a compassionate nature for ourselves and like, okay, we could try again tomorrow. You know, if 3 cigars is too much, maybe we cut it down, maybe we reduce it, or maybe this is just not like for me, like, ugh, you know, like, but it gives us the freedom to have autonomy within that choice.
Well, and that self-awareness, you know, that, I mean, it's one of the gifts and sometimes curses that, you know, you're just constantly kind of doing those little internal inventories, you know, of like, you know, how, for me all day, like, how do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? I'm so aware of how I feel all the time. And I look at my husband and, you know, if I ask him how he's doing or how he's feeling or whatever, you know, he's like, I'm fine. You know what I mean? It's just like not even something to like really dive into. Meanwhile, I could give him a TED talk about like everything I've experienced all day long internally. And that's one of the reasons I think we're able to notice when things are getting out of balance. And it's also like when, for me anyways, that's when I know that I'm kind of out of integrity with myself. Like that's when I can point out like, ooh, that's like a little bit of like an addiction kind of part of me coming up when it's like, how did I get here? Because it's like, okay, I am very aware every single day. So if suddenly I'm like, how did I get here? I'm like, there were a lot of things that I pretty intentionally didn't pay attention to over and over, like kind of convinced myself that like, it's not that bad. We're just not going to worry about that, you know? And that's how it ended up with alcohol. It's like, how did I get here? And it's like, well, let's review the evidence, because there are a lot of days that, you know, I could have probably noticed and I didn't want to. But, you know, we've talked about this on this podcast 1,000 times that like we are often a community of people who don't do moderation very well. And that is one of the reasons that we feel incredibly deeply. And when we do something that is going to help, whether it's ourselves or others, often others, we do that so freaking hard, you know, like we freaking help, you know, like, cause it's the biggest way that we can do things. And I love that about us. And it's also hard to do that.
And it's annoying. Sheesh.
It's so annoying. I know.
Hey, well, you know what's crazy though? So now I'm here. I'm hitting this theme. There's this theme. I'm about to pull these strings and put them together. So at the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about like how, Chris, you were travel blogging and you were showing up in different ways creatively. And it was like, yo, I got to like stop it. I'm burning out, right? And then in the thing you sent over, another thing that really like resonated with me was the concept of trying it on, like, you know, which I can relate to very much so, but like searching throughout life, seeing what resonates with your spirit, and like, let me try this and see how this feels, and kind of playing with the things that you identify or like find that contribute to your personality in ways that's like life has so much to offer. Add that to the extremes of the pendulum swing, and you get every now and then, I gotta turn this off, because I've been about videography for the past 7 months. I've been trying to be Quentin Tarantino. What is wrong with me? I bought 13 cameras and I've started 7 podcasts and I have to put it down. What has been your relationship to like having that experience of like that pendulum swinging, but also embracing life in a way that you find different things and try them on?
I think I have gotten a lot better at recognizing the patterns of when trying too many things on becomes overwhelming. Um, and I think that's what I mean about like the Exploring Upstate blog. It was just like I was doing it. I'm like, I don't know if I can continue to like sustain this, but I didn't know anything else. And like what you just kind of mentioned was establishing an identity. Like it kind of becomes who you are. And if you're no longer doing this thing, like who are you then?
Hmm.
And if I think back to you were talking about like the identity of who I was when I got like walked out of high school. Everybody in school already knew who I was and what I was up to. Like teachers knew, like other students. I remember one time I had a kid from another class, like another graduating class, walk up and ask to buy some LSD. And I was like, I don't even know your name.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know who you are, but like, so like people knew who I was.
She was that guy. Huh?
Right. Yeah. But if you don't have, like, if you don't have that anymore, like, who are you?
Mm.
And I think that we probably continue to do that as we get older. And um, with that like intro bio that Liz so graciously provided for me, like we think about when we see other people and we attribute certain things to them, we create our own little identity for them, even if that's not an identity that they have. And we're constantly trying to balance that stuff. Like, think about I'm in the gym pretty much every day, and there's a lot of people that I see every single day, but I've never spoken to. But I know like their whole story because I made it up in my head.
Mm.
So, like, we're not even just struggling, I think, with our own identity of who we are, but we're also battling how everyone else sees us. Um, and again, it's your pendulum, man.
Yeah.
Trying to find some common place in between where it works for all of us, and hopefully surrounding ourselves with people that give us enough grace to be very imperfect with it.
Yeah. And so, my question, Chris, who are you
Yeah.
right now?
Well, I'm a 45-year-old guy who's doing okay, struggling with a few things and succeeding in a whole bunch of other places. Um, but I do think one area that I'm succeeding in is uh, opening myself up to opportunities of community and wanting to get back towards helping others outside myself. Um, I hopefully am a good son, hopefully a good grandkid, hopefully a good coworker. And I say hopefully because, again, I know that I make mistakes and I'm not perfect at any of that stuff. But what I try to do is make an attempt uh, towards my best as much as possible.
Mm.
Some days my best is better than others.
Mm. It's amazing.
Man, I don't know if I've thought about who I am for a long time.
Man, every time I'm asked that question, I'm like, I don't know. And I think, like, we tend to want to answer that question like it's a test answer. But
Right.
if life isn't a test, life is to be experienced. And then depending on the day that you ask me, depending on what the answers to that question may be, and they're always all correct because it's my experience. And that's a beautiful thing about recovery is that like we can show up and have whatever experience is there to be had. And, if we sprinkle a little bit of compassion and understanding in there, we might be able to cultivate some wisdom in the midst of it.
Yeah.
I also, like, as I'm trying to come up with an answer for your question on the spot.
It's funny that was the hardest question.
Yeah, ask me about anything except myself. You then, again, this sense of identity, like if that's who I am, and I just told you two that, and I told myself that, and I told whoever is listening to this or watching this later that, like, that's not what I have to live up to. That's who people think I am, so I better be that.
Yeah.
And the idea of trying it on was introduced to me by my friend Lorraine. I think 2 years ago, and I don't even remember what it was we were talking about, but she's like, you don't have to like commit to do this the rest of your life. Like if you want to try like going to a yoga class, it doesn't mean like you're now going to be a yogi and doing it every single day and like doing this whole thing. But again, yeah, the pendulum swing, the German gummy bears. Like, no, if I go to a yoga class, I do have to do all that stuff. And I do have to get the best possible yoga mat, and I have to get the best blocks, and I have to go and I have to be the best possible yoga, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And if I don't go on this day, if I don't go X, I'm going to immediately set goals, right? This many times per week is how many times I have to go. And this is what the, ultimate's going to look like for me anyways. And like, if I don't, I will fail. I will have failed, and it's like, well, that was fun for 30 seconds until I did that to the thing.
So you talked yourself out of it.
I know, it's like broke it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying it on is like, you know what? Maybe you don't have to be this because you want to, but maybe just kind of check it out and give it a try, and that's okay too. But again, like right now in this conversation, I'm good with that. But tomorrow in the evening when I get stuck in my head and I'm like ruminating on something, that doesn't mean I'm going to be okay with it.
No. Yeah, I think one thing for me for sure that I've had to like learn to lean into, because the unlimited amount of choices and unlimited amount of answers to that question can be debilitating for some. And that's why, sometimes it's like, yo, just give me this and just let me like just do my thing over here. Just leave me alone, even though it might not be the best for me. And for me, like I've had to kind of seek out some of those things that I can hang my hat on. And it's just me personally, like that might look different for somebody else. But if you ask me who I am, I could always tell you I'm a student. Like I'm a forever be a student, because there's never going to be a day where I'm not going to be curious or inquisitive or trying to figure out like what is there that I can take from this and learn and make myself better to be able to contribute to others, right? And then, people, what do you believe in? Impermanence? Like that's one of the things that I've seen that continues to remain is that nothing stays the same. Like I can hang my hat on that. Those type of things allow me to build a home that fits for like my spiritual inclination. And it's like, okay, as long as I have those things, then the other things could change and switch. And I know my proclivity for those changes, and we just allow it to be what it is, and we just gonna have fun, man. This is life. Let's do it. Liz.
There's such a dichotomy though, because I'm thinking about, like this whole concept of identity is so fascinating. And it's cool that I feel like we're almost exactly the same age, Chris. And so, we were right at that cusp of like, I remember when we didn't even, getting a computer in the house was such a big deal, and then, I was an adult first time, like a phone was put in my hand at all, much less a smartphone, so it's just like having lived in both of those worlds, it's kind of a interesting way to look at it. Because when I look at online, I feel like we are both required to identify ourselves and define ourselves and have that thing that you are, and now it's online so it's forever. And also we're exposed to more choices than we've ever been exposed to before. There are more ways of being. There are more, recovery is a prime example, like it was like, there's this, really it was 12 step or nothing, like back not that long ago. Yeah. And now, I'm so excited about the fact that there are so many different, organizations and pathways, and like, whether you went to rehab or got arrested or, lived on the street for a while, or just decided, like I get real bad anxiety after I drink. So like, this isn't going to work for me anymore. You have all these different like ways to figure that out. And you can have seasons of that. Like you said, like this whole non-alcoholic beverage thing wasn't a thing for you in the beginning, and now it is. And like the fact that we can grow and change and we have all these options available to us is very cool. But also that is a new thing, because there wasn't always all those options. And at the same time, to be having this like platform where we can just define ourselves and like have people see our account and just think this is this person. Like I have people that think of me only as a yoga teacher, and that's been a sliver of my life. It's a huge part, but so it's a lot. That's a lot, and our brains weren't necessarily built for it. So it's exciting, and it does make that question hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, my brain was definitely not built for it.
Yeah.
I don't know what my brain was built for, but it was something. I don't know.
And so
That's
with
something
that
to
hopeful
ponder on.
message, kids, we'll go ahead and get up out of here. No, I mean, but before we go, I mean, I agree. And I think just like we had and have to continue to figure out how to best show up and create a space that's safe for our growth and our unfolding. Like it's our responsibility to find the communities, the resources, the support that can be there for us and contribute to like that process of understanding as we fumble around, bumble around, and put this on and take this off and put this on and take this off. So is it the responsibility of you, the listener, to kind of have that exploration in the midst of the environment that exists now, where, I'm raising a daughter, I'm raising a son, my son 19, my daughter 12, and when you come up in those developmental years, you're looking on social media and it's like you see this girl and she is the makeup person and that's like what she is. And you see all of the stuff that she's been able to create by being this. And it's like you're trying to develop and find out who you are. And it's like, well, I don't have a thing. And it's like, nobody has a thing because we're humans. It might, we might lean into to some things, but like it's unrealistic to expect a human to like be one thing, and really be happy or be fulfilled or satisfied. Maybe there's somebody like that, but it's a process of like leaning into the experience and allowing for the experience to work on us and be wrong over and over and over again. And that's okay. It's okay to be that because today we could try again and maybe we'll find something that's right. That's a little more hopeful than the other message that we was going to leave with. And everybody's doomed.
It's impossible.
Chris, this has been a phenomenal episode. And I knew it when I read your thing, like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a great conversation with this guy. And I'm amazed that Liz continues to attract these amazing people. And I'm not amazed because Liz is amazing. And of course she would. And how did you like, before we get out of here, how did you like her yoga class?
Well, I mean, you're putting
no pressure.
But out of 5 stars.
I could bring up a text message that I sent to somebody that said, like, genuinely, I really enjoyed it because it was very, very chill and low expectations about how successful I can be into getting into all these things. I've gone to some yoga classes where they're like, downward dog, plank, constant. And if you don't know what those things are, you're like mostly looking up to see what someone else is doing, like try to get to like that spot. And like Liz was very relaxed and cool and it just all worked. So it was a great way to spend a Friday evening.
That's
6 out of 5 stars, Liz. 6 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, definitely.
This means a lot. A lot.
All right. Well, yeah, definitely appreciate you coming to the show, Chris. If we're going to put all of your information in places that people can find you in the description of this episode, but is there anything that you want to leave the listener that have made it this far to where they can find you, or final words before we get up out of here?
Yeah, I guess the final words would be like, don't talk yourself out of trying something that might be helpful. Like I was always comparing myself, thinking like there's no way that I really have a problem because this is what a problem looks like. And my experience doesn't match that. So find ways to relate to other people. That's how I've found my community, is relating rather than comparing.
Beautiful.
Yeah. There's always, I can't imagine a single person who doesn't have, a story or a perspective that's going to be impactful for another person, where there's so many of us out in this world and there's just so many little strings that attach us. And when you start to find those strings, especially in this community, especially when, if you're listening to this podcast, somehow you're impacted by, substance use recovery and just, those threads, they start to, weave a community and a feeling of belonging that so many of us, again, talked ourselves out of, but we need each other. We are a beautiful tapestry. Yeah, I could just keep going with this metaphor. You're going to have to stop me.
Before we metaphor you out, listener, Thank you for coming and tapping in this long. If you made it this far, you definitely are people, and we your people. And we will catch you on the next episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. And Happy New Year.
Bye.